I've got a stack of books here, friends. It's time to get serious. Welcome back to the channel, Book Dragons. I'm so glad you've joined me today. You know, I was talking the other day with Timrath. You remember Timrath, my channel mascot, my dragon here. I don't talk about Timrath very often, but she does, peek around my chair when I'm doing videos and stuff like that. So you've seen her. I was talking with Timrath the other day, and, because Book Dragons, we talk to each other, and Timrath was informing me that even though I talk all the time about certain books that are favorites of mine, I've never done a video talking about all the books that are on my list of my favorites of all time. And I'm like, really? First of all, I don't know how she knew that, because to my knowledge, stuffed Book Dragons can't watch YouTube, but maybe there's something I'm not aware of, so we're just going to go with it. But I looked it up, and lo and behold, I have never done a video about my favorite books of all time. So this is that video, guys. We are going to get serious with this. We're going to talk about my favorites. I do have 3 honorable mentions. That's right, because I can't just choose 10. It was extremely difficult to pick 10 books out of all my favorites, but I did it. Some were more difficult than others. But yeah, so I've got 3 honorable mentions, and then we're going to get right to the list of my top 10 books in the stack here next to me. So, I'm going to put on my eyes, because I need to do that, and we're going to talk about the first 3. And coming in at number 13, well, you can think of it as 13. It's not really on a numbered list, but you can think of it as 13, and that would be The Elfstones of Shannara by Terry Brooks. Guys, Terry Brooks is one of my favorite authors, and The Elfstones of Shannara, I think, is just one of his best books out there. I loved the Sword of Shannara trilogy in general, but Elfstones was the best book in that series. And you can fight me on that, because I'm willing to stand on that one. Even Terry always recommends that people start with Elfstones. Even though the Sword of Shannara is great, Elfstones is probably the better place to start. And I haven't read all of Terry's Shannara books yet, but of the ones I've read, I still go back and think about the Elfstones of Shannara as one of my favorites. So it's on this list. The next one is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is one of my favorite books, most definitely. It is a magnificent work of prose and fantasy imagination. I just absolutely love Kvothe and the whole story around him. I can't wait for more in this world. We really need to get that next book, but until we do, I'm just going to love on The Name of the Wind. The Wise Man's Fear was good too, but The Name of the Wind just still has something special for me that I can't get around. So I'm looking forward to more, and that's on this list at this point. The last honorable mention is Changes. That is book 12 in the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher. I absolutely love the character of Harry Dresden, and I love all the Dresden books. There's not one Dresden book that I would look at and say I didn't enjoy it. Some I enjoyed more than others, and Changes is probably my favorite so far of all the Dresden novels, because we are getting more. But as of right now, Changes really takes it for me. There were so many twists, so many new revelations, so many wow moments in that story that just had me sitting in awe of Jim Butcher's story crafting, and it's a wild ride. You may be shocked that other Dresden books did not end up on this list, and in fact, my top 10 does not have a Dresden book. Doesn't mean that I don't like the series. It was this close. It was this close to ending up on the top 10 list, but there were others that overshadowed it for me. So that's my line. I'm sticking to it. Let's get to the top 10. And we are going to start with The Animal by Chad Nicholas. This is my number 10 pick. If you like horror, specifically slashers, you must read this book. This was a flawless book for me. absolutely flawless. I did not find anything that I disliked about it. Chad is a self-published author. I mean, this is just such a well put together book, and the story is brilliant. So if you have not checked out The Animal yet, and check out Chad Nicholas in general. I loved Nightmare, I loved Shade, his first two books, and this is by far his best that he's written, but all of them are good. So check Chad out, okay? The next one we're going to get to is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I have only read the original trilogy that Stieg wrote before he died. So I don't think I plan to continue the series. And it was tough picking between the three books, guys, because that entire trilogy is absolutely magnificent. It is a thrill ride of epic proportions. The character work for Lisbeth Salander is out of this world. I just kept diving back into this. I could not put it down. And it got to a point in the series where I couldn't put the series down either. I just had to read the next book immediately and figure out what happened. But this book is still, I think, the best book in the series. And it could work as a standalone if this is all you wanted to do. But trust me, guys, once you read this, you're going to want to read the other two books. I highly recommend them all, but this is on my top 10 list. All right. Next book, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. You are not surprised to see a Neil Gaiman book on this list. I love The Graveyard Book so much. Bod is a perfectly endearing character. He's raised by the ghosts in the graveyard because his parents were murdered, and this is just such a fun book, guys. It's magical, it's whimsical, it's flat out weird sometimes, and I love every minute of it. Guys, treat yourself. Read The Graveyard Book. It's an easy read. It's a short read. You will be glad you read this book. And the next book on my list, guys, I don't have a rule for this video that I can't duplicate authors, because I've got another Neil Gaiman book on my list, and that is Neverwhere. Coming in at number 7. I just absolutely love this book. It is such a fun ride. I've read it twice, and it gets better on the second read. Trust me, it does. It's kind of an Alice in Wonderland retelling with a male protagonist. You know, you're flipping between London above and London below and just meeting all these weird and crazy characters, and the antagonist is just like a total shock. If you're reading it for the first time, you're like, that came out of left field, but it was so well done. It made so much sense. If you want a treat and a good place to start with Neil Gaiman, you can read this book. Neverwhere is absolutely amazing. So, all right, I'm going to stop going on about Neverwhere, and we're going to get to number 6. And my number 6 book is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Guys, this is my second favorite sci-fi book of all time. I absolutely adored Hyperion. It was an amazing read for me. I put it in a category of literary science fiction. It has so many hallmarks of literary fiction and just enough of the fantastical elements of science fiction to keep you diving into the possibilities of the future. It was just so well written. I loved the different technologies that Dan Simmons dreamed up for this book, and it's very poetic, both literally and figuratively, and you'll just have to read it to find out why. I highly recommend Hyperion. I don't have a physical copy of it because I am waiting for them to release a nice edition that I can get my hands on of Hyperion. Because I've had copies of Hyperion in the past, but the print size, guys, I mean, come on. I at least need a book with decent size print to have a permanent copy in my collection. All right, so we're going to move on to my favorite science fiction book of all time. Coming in at number 5, that would be Dune by Frank Herbert. This is one of the most brilliant books I have ever read. I've read it twice. I'll probably read it again sometime soon. This is just an amazing work of science fantasy. And I know you're going to fight me on that, but it has so many fantasy elements that I label it science fantasy. I know it's science fiction. There's so much about this book that reminds you of reading fantasy literature that I can't help but think of it as fantasy as well. My favorite science fiction book of all time, and I don't think anything will unseat that. I'm open to that happening in the future. But right now, yeah, this comes in at number 5 of my favorite books of all time. All right, guys. Coming in at number 4, we have A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin. This is book 3 in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I love all the books in A Song of Ice and Fire. I do. I love them all. But of all the books, A Storm of Swords was the most riveting to me. That the character work in this story is absolutely phenomenal, breathtaking at times, heartbreaking at times, especially if you know the scene I'm talking about when I mention the Red Wedding. Just thinking about that makes me tear up. It was so brutal and visceral, but it was written in such an amazing way that I was left speechless after reading that scene. And so many other things about this book as well just make it stand out for me as one of the best books that George R. R. Martin has ever written. I love everything about this series, but book 3, A Storm of Swords, sticks in my head the most out of all the books. So yeah, there we go. All right, guys, now we are into my top 3. Top 3, can you believe it? We're getting there. Okay. And we're getting into a case of another author that I have more than once on this list, okay? Now, this was really hard, guys. This author that I'm going to talk about next is my second favorite author of all time. And it was so hard to pick between her books. But I had to do it, and I'm like, okay, if I had to pick one over the other, I'm going to put this at number 3, and that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Guys, so many good things about this book. The character development, the whimsical nature of the book, about a secret society revolving around books and magical doorways and mystical destinies. I just absolutely loved this book. Erin Morgenstern has such a unique perspective on the world and provides you a window into her world and the way she sees it in such a way that you really feel like you're there. The Starless Sea was just an absolute must-read for me, and I will be reading it again. I have a special edition of it on the way. That's how much I love it. And until I get that, this is my reading copy right here. So, all right, I'm going to stop talking about that. We're going to get to the next book. Okay, guys, so my second favorite book of all time is what we're talking about now. And that is also by Erin Morgenstern. That is The Night Circus. You probably heard me talk about The Night Circus, how much I love it. I have a special edition that I got not too long ago that I'm just absolutely enamored with. It's so nice. And this book is just a wonderful experience. I really hope that you get to read it if you have not. Just like with The Starless Sea, it's a super whimsical, magical ride about a circus that only appears at night. And it just seems to magically appear and reappear in different locations around the globe. The people who work the circus are all very unique and interesting, very mysterious. It's just such a fun ride, and I have read this twice, and I will read it again, so I can't say enough good things about The Night Circus, and I really hope you check it out. Alright, guys, so the last book on this list. I'm sure many of you can guess what book it is, but I'm going to mention it anyway. And that, guys, is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. That's right. The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman is my favorite book of all time. And it's actually a novella. I mean, it's really, really short. But, guys, there's something about this book that just speaks to me every single time I read it. And maybe it's the nostalgia that it evokes. I mean, I don't know. You know, it's about a man who goes back to his hometown where he grew up for a funeral, and as he arrives there, he starts reliving all the memories and experiences he had as a young boy, along with his friend Letty Hempstock, who lives in the house at the end of the lane with a pond behind it that is more than just a pond. And it's just so magical and dark at times, and the things it made me feel and the memories it evoked as I was reading it were just positively wonderful. Yeah, I grew up in a small town. I know what it's like to have friends down the road that you get together with on occasion, and I know what it's like to make your imagination run wild and go exploring in places you shouldn't. And it was just such a wonderful tale. And I've read it 3 times, I think, and I'll read it 3 or 4 times more, 10 times more. It is just so wonderful for me. My favorite book of all time, Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. So I told you that I was going to have repeat authors on this list. And Neil Gaiman is on here 3 times, guys. Could you tell he's my favorite author? I bet you couldn't, right? I'm sure you didn't know he's my favorite author of all time. All right, guys. So I'm going to end this video here. Let me know what you thought about my top 10 books of all time and the honorable mentions. Don't forget the honorable mentions. And I will talk to you next time. Make sure you read more books.